Hello friends, welcome back to my channel, or if it's your very first time here, welcome on in. I am back with another monthly plan with me. I hope you are all well and good. This plan with me is going to be a little bit different than I feel like anything that I've done in the past. There is very little ephemera for my March setup, and that is pretty much because I just wanted to doodle a whole bunch of stationery, and believe it or not, I have never actually done a stationery specific theme before. So I am very excited just to try something different, and yeah, I hope you enjoy what I end up creating. So there were a few inspirations for this theme. I mean, I guess besides the obvious stationery aspect. I have been wanting to do this for a while, but I couldn't really figure out how I wanted to translate it in my style, I guess. But I ended up finding this beautiful washi tape at Kinokuniya, which is a Japanese stationery store. I paid it a little visit on my birthday actually, which was last week on February 20th, so happy birthday to all my fellow Pisces out there. But I did a little perusal and I found this beautiful washi tape, and it has kind of like watercolor-esque stationery with this gilded border on each of the items, and I just thought it was so cool, and I don't have anything like that in my collection. So that was the first item. I didn't initially see that washi tape and think, oh, I want to do a monthly theme with that. I just knew that I wanted to use it in my journal at some point. But my other inspiration is actually an art print that I have recently finished. It is not in my store yet because I still have to order it from my manufacturer, but I will do a little sneak peek and insert a photo here of what it looks like. This is my new stationery art print. It is very similar to how I have been really enjoying making art prints with this kind of item collage style. So between that and the washi tape, I was just, I guess, in the mood to draw a whole bunch of stationery, so here we are. I am first working on the cover page, which I ended up making a 2-page spread. Essentially, the vision that I had for this cover page was that I was going to have March be in the middle, and then it was going to be surrounded by a whole bunch of doodled stationery items with only the Sakura white jelly roll pen. Now, I was considering using the Uniball Signo pen in gold to match like the gilded stationery that's on the washi tape. However, that pen is notorious for taking forever to dry, and I didn't exactly want to wait several minutes for each of the stationery items, so I just went with my trusty white jelly roll pen. However, I do end up using the gold pen at some point just to draw some star doodles, which I feel like is such a signature of mine at this point. I literally cannot help myself with drawing stars in nearly every single monthly setup. As far as the stationery items that I chose to draw for this cover page, I wanted to keep in mind a few things. Number one, my favorite stationery items, and number two, the items that would look visually the most appealing, which is why I didn't end up drawing my holy grail pen, the 𝒂𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒄𝒍𝒂𝒊𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 pen. I started sketching it out and it just looked kind of boring. Like it just didn't look visually interesting, so I didn't end up drawing it and I drew a Tombow marker instead. So by keeping those pointers in mind, I essentially created like a stationery collage, and to be honest, it pretty much mimics what my desk looks like after I, finish filming or just journaling in general. My desk area tends to be pretty messy anytime I do any sort of journaling. As you could see, before I started doodling everything, I had all of the stationery items like perfectly placed around the journal, and it looked really nice and aesthetic, and then those items kind of just started getting in my way, so I needed to shift them all to the side so I would have enough room to actually draw the supplies themselves. As you could probably tell from what I'm currently doodling, a lot of the stationery items are ones that I included in my art print, so I had that reference on the side, and then I also included some new ones like the fountain pen and the mild liners and the Tombows, and also the wax seal stamp, which I felt like it looked really cool. Even though I don't use the wax seal very often, I just think the shape makes, fills that space really well, so it was just fun to draw, to be honest. I also thought it would be a really cool detail to have some of that paint that was coming off of the paintbrush to start dripping on the wax seal. I don't know, it kind of just tied that section of the page together. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense with like the perspective and everything, but I think it looks really fun. And what I ended up doing was adding a whole bunch of little paint splotches all over the page to fill in the more narrow, emptier spots. And then in addition to the paint splotches, I also drew a bunch of little tiny paper clips, which were so much fun to draw, and I continue to draw them throughout the rest of the setup. After finishing all of the stationery doodles, I went in with my Posca paint pen to write out the title of the month, of course. I allocated this ginormous space in the middle, and it just looks so good. This is honestly probably one of my favorite cover pages, which is so interesting because my favorite cover page from 2024 was probably my May Galaxy. And that was literally on the complete opposite spectrum of this spread. That one took me days because I was using gouache paint throughout the entire setup. But just the cover page itself took forever because I was doing like this layered galaxy technique and adding in a bunch of paper ephemera. And it took forever, but it's the reason why it's one of my favorite spreads is because of how much time I dedicated to it. But this is just so simple in comparison and yet so effective, and I am so glad that I have finally done like a stationery inspired setup. As I mentioned before, I'm going in with the Uniball Signo pen in gold to draw a whole bunch of stars to add that gilded effect. And then I also use the Sakura White Jelly Roll pen yet again to draw even more stars, and that is the completed cover page. Alrighty, moving on to the next spread. This is going to be my habit tracker for the month. Whipping out the Posca paint pen yet again to draw this ginormous grid on both of these pages. I was initially debating on whether to separate this between the mood and the habit tracker, but after kind of laying everything out, I think this would have just looked a whole lot better if it was solely the habit tracker, and I cannot wait for you guys to see the end result. Literally, this is probably one of my favorite habit trackers. I have been wanting to get a little bit more creative with the habit trackers specifically because I feel like they just usually tend to look the same because there isn't really much you can do with like calendars, at least from what I've done in the past. And when I tell you that this is, it just turns out so good. Okay, let me not get sidetracked. Essentially, what I wanted to create for the mood tracker is a replica of one of those photo grid things that you hang on your wall. So essentially, the calendars almost look like photos or post-its that are being attached to this grid via these faux binder clips. So I just used one of my stationery stamps that I have lying around. Stamped it to a random piece of like ephemera paper that I have and tore around it to give it kind of like a more rough around the edges look, I guess, and then pasted it on top of each of the calendars to make it look like they're actually hanging from the grid. And then just using my alphabet stamps, I wrote out habit tracker, of course, and then used one of my circle stickers to adhere it to the photo grid as well. And I do a similar technique for the rest of the items that I paste onto this fake photo grid, and it just ends up looking very cool. It was exactly what I was envisioning, and I am very, very happy with it. Since I do use a black page bullet journal, I kind of have to be a little bit more creative in terms of how I use my stamps and my stamping inks, because you are not going to be able to see black ink on black paper. So by using this method of stamping separately and then pasting it in, it just adds this different vibe, and I don't know, it gives me a chance to actually use stamps that maybe I wouldn't normally use because of the color of the paper. Similarly, I've been wanting to make use of these stationery stickers from �𝒂𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒂𝒊𝒎𝒂 Studio, but because her stickers are, for the most part, transparent, they do not look very good against black paper. So by using the same technique of sticking them onto a separate piece of paper, cutting it out, and then pasting it on the grid, it kind of further adds to that collage detail that I want, and also this like twisted perspective of these like three-dimensional items being flattened onto like a surface. I don't know. This was not really intentional, but it was kind of the vibe I was going for, and I'm here for it. After adding in a few extra stationery supplies, I used one of my mini calendar stickers from my mini calendar sticker sheet and pasted that onto the grid as well, which I feel like would probably be helpful when filling in the habit trackers anyways. And I was just trying to think of little small details that would make sense on a photo grid, so I also found this very chill image of like some coffee and a book, and then another small image of a quote that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I think I initially got this from a sticker pack set from Journal-Say, and I feel like those packs tend to have quotes that don't really make a whole lot of sense, but that's okay. It filled the space that I needed it to, and that's all that matters. Next, I'm just going in with my Pilot G2 pen. This is not one of my favorite pens because of how much it smudges, but I needed to use a thicker pen because of that double layering between the binder clip paper and the calendar itself. Then switching back to my 𝒂𝒂𝒊𝒔𝒂𝒊𝒎𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂𝒂 not have enough spaces for the rest of the days in March. So I needed to try to come up with a creative way to add the rest of the days without totally ruining the entire setup, which is kind of dramatic. It really wasn't that big of a deal, but so what I ended up doing was cutting a week out from an extra calendar that I had and then pasting a set of 2 days onto each individual calendar, and that pretty much did the trick. Crisis was averted. It actually doesn't look half bad. It's not as seamless as I would have liked, obviously, but all things considered, I am pretty happy with it. To finish off the spread, I'm just adding in a few extra small details like these little strings to make it look like this photo grid is hanging off of the wall. And then, of course, going back in with the Uniball Signo pen in gold to draw even more stars, more paper clips, and more stars. And that is the habit tracker all done. Alrighty, moving on to the final spread. For this monthly setup, we are going to first be working on the mood tracker. Now, as I mentioned earlier, my initial idea was to combine the habit and mood trackers on that same photo grid, but I ended up coming to the conclusion that it just wasn't going to be enough room for what I exactly wanted to do. So I am just doing the mood tracker on its own page instead with its own kind of theming. I did, for a split second, consider drawing 31 individual stationery items, but I thought better of it because I was not trying to be here for, another hour. So what I decided to do was, again, make use of stamps that I don't really get to use all that often to delineate my mood for every single day. But before that, I wanted to give the stamps a place to call home on the page, so I essentially created this collage of post-its that were floating on the page itself. To be honest, I wish I would have done something a little bit more with the background, but it's okay. I was trying to be a little bit more minimalist with this setup, and I wanted the stamps and the paper to kind of speak for itself, or at least that's what I'm trying to tell myself. I am going in and numbering everything 1 through 31 and making sure to leave enough space between each of the numbers to leave room for the stationery stamps. So essentially, each of these stamps is reflective of my mood for the day. The paint palette being a great day, the paint tube being a good day, and the scissors obviously meaning, well, the day just wasn't really that great. I didn't leave room for the key as what normally tends to happen, so I just pasted it onto the bottom of the next page, which is just going to be the favorites page anyway, so it's not like it's really going to be in the way all that much. So essentially every day I will just grab the appropriate stamp and use it to specify whatever mood I had for that given day. Finishing off the spread after I pasted in the key, I went in with, of course, some more stars and paper clips, and then also using one of my black pens, I just went in to fine-tune the title of the page, solely because the thickness of the Posca paint pen made a few areas of the header a little bit muddy. And after doing that, this page is all done. Moving on to the final page for this monthly setup, as I mentioned earlier, this is just going to be the quintessential favorites page. I was debating on adding an entirely separate spread just dedicated to my favorite stationery of the year, but to be honest, I knew that this video was going to be going up a little bit late and I didn't want to dedicate more time to making a whole, like, 2-page spread, so we're just sticking with the normal monthly favorites this time around. Starting off, I am just pasting in the same traveler's envelope that I've used for the previous monthly spreads so far this year. Essentially, I just use this envelope to house any sort of ephemera that I collect throughout the month, and then adding in this little bullet point post-it to list any of my favorites from the month as well. Which also reminds me, I have officially decided to deviate from any sort of to-do list or similar tracker in my bullet journals because I am the proud owner of a Hobonichi Weeks notebook. This is the first time I am using a Hobonichi anything, and I am trying my hand at a weekly situation because they have never really worked in my bullet journals, so we'll see how this goes. I do plan to probably do a video or two on my experience using the Hobonichi Weeks. If you have any tips, tricks, or like maybe your favorite Hobonichi specific YouTube channels, please let me know because I am such a noob when it comes to Hobonichi. Any and all inspiration will be very much appreciated. Going back in with my alphabet stamps to write out the title for this page, and after adding in the final stars and paper clips, this page is all done. Alrighty friends, it is time for the final flip through of my March setup inspired by Cozy Stationery. I really hope you enjoyed a bit of a different theme from me and a bit of a different way with a lot less ephemera. I do enjoy making these kinds of setups every now and again. Truthfully, it's just whatever mood I'm in. If I'm in the mood to be crazy with collages, then I'm going to do that. But if I feel in the mood to just doodle a little bit more, then I'm going to do that as well. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!